I mean, if you do it with the lights on, we can still see the screen. It's not.
All right, then yeah, keep the lights on, I guess. Sure.
The screen is very well lit, I think.
All right, so I guess we'll get started then. All right, so my name is Chris Eulinger. I graduated in the class of 2012, and my talk is called Teaching JavaScript as a Foreign Language. So this is a talk about the time that I spent teaching programming in Thailand, and some of the lessons that I learned that I feel helped me to become a better teacher, but also just a better technical communicator. So this story begins on May 19th, 2012, when I graduated from Loyola University, Maryland. And 2 days later, on May 21st, I was on a 23-hour plane to Thailand. And when I got there, I taught at St. Gabriel's College, K-12 boys private school in Dusit district of Bangkok. And I taught as part of the intensive English program. So that meant that we weren't just teaching English, reading and writing, we were also teaching math, science, geography, and other topics in English to help students develop a better vocabulary. So after the first year, I was invited back for a second year, and they gave me the choice of what I wanted to teach, and so I tried to take on the 11th grade C programming curriculum.
Wow.
So in this talk, I want to cover three main topics. Word choice, how to choose words so that you're best understood by your students. I want to talk about reducing friction, making it, so that there are fewer moving parts in your lessons and so that people don't get confused. And I also want to talk about breaking down concepts into bite-sized pieces that people can understand more easily. And these topics, they can apply if you're a teacher, but they can also apply if you have ever pair programmed with anybody, or you've ever needed to tutor someone, or you've ever written a documentation or explanation of what you've built. These same concepts still apply. So first of all, let's talk about word choice. So this right here is the face of confusion. This person might seem like they kind of know what's going on, but inside they are just freaking out. When students don't know, when they don't know the definition of a word that you've just said, or they misunderstand something, they'll often just keep on going along and trying to act like they know what's going on. And so as a teacher, it's important to recognize that students may not be the ones to raise concerns, and to sort of go back and review things as often as possible, and make sure that they know the meanings of all the words that you're saying. So that's the first lesson here, is to be proactive with that kind of stuff. Now, my students were good at English. They've been learning it for 11 years, but it was still exhausting for them to have to translate, for hours every day. And I knew how it felt too, because I was trying to learn Thai while I was there. And so I would have to, hear somebody tell me a sentence that was really, really long, and I noticed that there were certain parts where I just got lost, and that sort of gave me some empathy for how they were feeling. So here's an example of a sentence from a lecture. So if you finish your work quickly, you can play games. And as you can see from this sort of animation, I'm going to have a few of these. The students were able to quickly translate each of these words. These are words that they hear pretty often. They're words that are part of their basic vocabulary that they've been studying since elementary school. And this is a sentence that they liked a lot. When you teach the computers class, you have a lot of kids who just want to play games, which is a distraction you don't have in other classes. So this is an example of a good sentence. And now here's an example of a bad sentence that I had in one of my lectures. It is integral that you close your curly braces, or function execution could continue outside your function block. So this is a train wreck. This was, I walked into class and I was all jazzed, and I was like, oh, I'm going to use flowery words like integral, when I totally didn't need to at all. So a sentence like this could make my students just totally give up and stop trying to process anything. And if that happened 5 minutes into a lesson, it would be really bad. So, just looking at this sentence though, they got a couple words in, but once I tripped them up with this word, they missed a whole bunch of words that they would have actually known. And I also was using a lot of technical terms that they didn't quite understand yet, and they weren't even in a position to try and figure out what function execution meant. I probably would have had more success if I had said something like, the program will keep running more. They would have probably gotten that a lot better. So after having a lot of lectures where nobody understood what I was saying, I started finding ways to revise a lot of my speech to make it more easily understood. So here's a sentence that you might find in a textbook, a basic textbook on programming. The return type specifies the type of value the function will return. Now, if I said this by itself, it probably wouldn't play too well. A lot of students would have difficulty with words like specifies, type, value, and function, and even return. So what I did was, because I was learning Thai at the time, I was also able to figure out that there's a way of phrasing this. If I said kind of thing instead of type of value, that's a phrasing that was like very commonly used in elementary school and stuff like that, and that was something that they would understand more easily. And I also knew that the word return was going to confuse them, and it even confuses some people in English because it's not being used in the normal way. Return normally means to go back, but in this case it sort of means to give back. And I actually looked up a Thai tutorial on programming, and they used the word kapai, which means to give back. So I tried changing out the word return for give back and type of value for kind of thing, and I did a couple other things to make the sentence more easy to understand. So let's take a look. What does return type mean? Return type tells the kind of thing the function will give back. So this sentence is a lot less elegant. Some people might call it a little bit less correct, and it's certainly not as specific. But it's understood a lot better, and I also have some ways of sort of priming them for the fact that this is something new that they don't understand. I start off with a question. I say, what does return type mean? Because I want them to know that this word return type, don't try and translate it. You haven't heard this word before. And then we're going to explain it, so I start with the definition in the next sentence. And as you can see, they didn't translate that. And they also didn't translate the word function, because this was in a lesson about functions. And they were still trying to figure out what this word function means, but they didn't have a Thai analog for it yet. So by taking the sentence and rephrasing it this way, I found that I often had a lot more success when I used sentences like these. So this kind of stuff is necessary when you're teaching people, for whom English is not their first language, but it's not like technical speech is a different language, right? Right?
No.
So some words we've recycled from English, but they mean totally different things in a programming context. So if you use words like class, prototype, or method, and there's somebody non-technical in the room, if you're at your job, or if you're just trying to teach somebody programming, they might actually get confused because they know these words, or they think they do, but they're just being used in a different way. So it's worth sort of questioning your assumptions about what people understand, in terms of these kinds of words. Now there are some words that we just clearly made up. I mean, like, come on. And some words are clearly the result of mad science, where some mad scientist programmer just went down to their basement and grabbed a bunch of dead Latin root words out of vats and stitched them together and held them up in the light of the full moon, and just lightning struck and burned their creation into the dictionary. I'm talking about you, refactor and concatenate. So let's focus on this word concatenate for a moment. So concatenate describes combining many things end to end to make a longer thing. It's a pretty simple idea, but it's a word that a lot of people who aren't programmers have never heard before. It'll just bamboozle them completely. So if you say a sentence like this at work, if we concatenate our JavaScript files, our page will load faster. If you have somebody from the business in the room or someone who's less technical, maybe a tester or something like that, they might hear the sentence and they'll think, okay, if we do something to our JavaScript files, our page will load faster. They might be able to put it together, they might not. Either way, it's putting a lot of burden on them to try and have like a sort of blank that they're going to need to fill. So what's a better word we could use instead? Now in this case, concatenate is very useful because it very specifically means combining things by putting them end to end. If you watched all 4 Star Wars movies in a row, you'd be concatenating them into one longer movie. But there's a less specific word that's still correct. We could use the word combine instead. So if we combine our JavaScript files, our page will load faster. So in this case, let me skip that. In this case, the sentence is still equally correct. Some people might be a little bit confused because we know that combine could mean to concatenate things or to interpolate things or any number of things like that. But most people will get it. This means, we're going to put our files together and that will make the page load faster. And if someone is non-technical, they might get that, okay, that makes sense, that if we combine our things into one thing, maybe that would help. So this sentence is a lot more informative to somebody who doesn't know as much about programming. So some takeaways here. Choose your words based on your audience. If you are talking to someone who's deeply technical, totally go for those specific words because they're very powerful and there's a reason that we have them. But there are some times when it's useful to sort of dial things down a little bit and choose words that favor understanding over specificity. And also just be aware of the fact that every word you use places a burden on the listener, and try and keep that burden as light as possible. So next I'm going to talk about reducing friction. So the first day of the first class, we did what every first class of programming does. We did the Hello World program. So this was the lineup for that class. I said, all right, students, go to your start menu. Now find dev C++, which was the really old editor that we used. All right, now copy this code that I have on the board, and then all right, go to project compile, project run. Don't worry about what that means just yet. All right, now run it. Okay, there, you're a programmer. Congratulations, welcome to the club. So there were a few problems here. One of them was that this took a while just to get a very small result. Part of it was that there's what I call the but don't worry about that test, which basically means if you have to say the phrase but don't worry about that 2 or 3 times over the course of an hour-long lesson or tutoring session, that probably means that things need to be broken down a bit more, because there's clearly something that students are missing. Some students asked me how the compiler works, and I was just like, I will not burden you with this insane knowledge. I also had a couple students ask me, so Mr. Chris, when do we get to make real programs? And I said, this is a real program, it's Hello World, see? And they went, no, real programs, like Counter-Strike. And I was like, oh, those programs. Now obviously, we can't get into Counter-Strike in the first lesson. There's graphics programming and network stuff that would be just ridiculous. But it did get me thinking about trying to come up with a way to teach students by having them make things that they would recognize more closely as programs. So in between the first and second semester of teaching, I saw this awesome article called Learnable Programming by Brett Victor, and it really changed the way that I thought about teaching, and also just about how to design an environment and a language that makes it easy for people to learn and understand what they're doing. And this prompted me to change things around entirely and to start the next semester by teaching JavaScript instead of C. And I used this library called Chalk.js. So what this is we've got an editor in the browser. Right next to the editor, you have the output, whatever's actually going to show on the screen. And at the top, we've got this scrubbing thing here, this little slider, which is actually a debugger, and it will actually step us through the execution of the program. So I thought this looked fantastic. We've got these annotations, and I could translate these into tags. There was fairly basic words that were in there. And that might help my students to at least have the computer explain to them what their program does, even if I couldn't. And it would give them much more visibility into what they were doing, and also how to debug things. And so I incorporated this into my lessons. I come back over here, close that out. And once this loads, I basically took that Chalk.js library and I localized it. And then I also, I put it up on a website. And this made the setup process at the beginning of class much faster, because instead of having to go through all of that stuff and dealing with compile and run and having them write all the boilerplate themselves because the computers were boot frozen, I couldn't even give them a file to start with. Now instead I just said, all right, go to this website, this exact one that you see here in the iframe, and now you can start writing code. And they could scrub through and they could see at each step what their program is doing. They could even do things like this, where you can take a number and dial it up or down and see what effect it has on the program. So this was all awesome stuff. This was built by the people who made Chalk.js, who were immensely talented. And I found that this made the lessons a lot easier to get into. And I also started seeing students sort of going off the rails more than I did in C, in a good way, where I had them draw, 4 houses, but I had one kid try and draw 100 houses and see if he could fill up the whole square. So when I saw stuff like that, I was like, yes, very good. But the thing is, the biggest deal was not the whiz-bang stuff with the annotations or the scrubber, or the ability to scrub numbers up and down. The biggest difference it's made was just the fact that startup time in class was much faster, and students had something more rewarding to do with the code that they wrote. And while we did end up going back to the console later in the semester, at least the students had something of an idea of why they would want to learn programming and why these things were important. So my last section is about something that I call the buzz. So the buzz is that feeling that you get. It's a feeling that, for me, it's one of the reasons that I love programming, and I know that a lot of people probably share that feeling. It's that feeling that you get when you write that one last line of code, or you squash that one last bug, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got like a rocket ship appearing on your screen or something like that. You know, you've got your program is running, and you're like, look at that, I did that, me, it's mine, and it's running, and it works, and it's amazing. And you know, it drives around and stuff. There. Or not, there we go. And you just look at this and you're just like, you know what, I want to get it so that everyone can do this, because I was able to do this in like a day. This actually probably took me like 4 days, but same difference. You know, and the buzz is a very positive feeling. It's the reason that programming can be a very positive space, because people are just going to, because people are just going to meetups and you know, presenting about things that in other industries would be like trade secrets, but everyone's just all about sharing this knowledge. It's a great thing. But the buzz also can lead to being an undisciplined teacher. And this is something that I learned, that basically, while I might love the fact that I was able to make this thing, someone else might want to make something different, and they might have a different path ahead of them. And as a teacher, it's important to exercise discipline and to sort of, you know, not look at how to get them from where they are to where you are, but maybe how to get them from where they are to where they want to be, which might be in your direction, but in that case, you know, they may have many steps along the way. So to illustrate that, this was my portfolio, which I made while I was in, towards the end of my time in Thailand. And I made it using Jekyll, which is a static site generator, and I could write my posts in Markdown and statically host them on GitHub Pages. And you know, I was hosting this website for free, and it had my name, chrisulinger.com, and I was just like, you know, I had project pages for all of my, you know, cool projects and stuff. And I was like, everybody should have a portfolio like this. This was so easy for me to make. Oh man, you know, if everyone, you know, had the ability to do this, it would be amazing. So when I got home, one of my friends asked me, hey, I'm looking to try and make a portfolio for myself. They were also a programmer. And so I was like, all right, hold on. I'm gonna write this tutorial post for you on my blog, and it'll explain everything. So this is that post. And these are the topics that you need to understand to get through the entire thing. So, any one of these is probably an entire hour-long lesson in and of itself. If you're doing a lesson about like how to get your portfolio set up, diving into Git is a big, you know, diversion off to the side. It's going to take up a lot of time and cause a lot of confusion, and it's not something that you can just go, but don't worry about that later. You know, Jekyll. What is a static site generator? Why would you want one? You know, what is this Ruby thing that I'm having to use to install all this stuff? What is all this stuff? You know, like, why does Jekyll not work and I need Octopress? What the heck is this thing? These are all things that you need to cover independently. And so when I asked my friend afterwards, he was like, that was a lot of stuff. And I was like, well, you know, what are you trying to do? And what he was trying to do was basically just get a static site set up with just an index.html, some CSS, and some JavaScript. And I could have done that much more easily without doing all of this. So my point is basically that, you know, instead of thinking about the way that you would do something or the way that's right to do something, sometimes it's best to just start with a small step that gets the person in the direction that they want to go. So final takeaways, think about your audience when choosing words and try and choose words that put the least burden on them. Keep count of how many times you say, but don't worry about that when describing something, and try and keep it to a minimum. And embrace the buzz, but remember to put your students' goals first. So that's all for this talk. One last thing I wanted to plug is that on Saturday, there's going to be a Baltimore Node School event. This is a great opportunity for anybody who's looking to learn more about JavaScript. It's going to be in Canton, and you can go to nodeschool.io/Baltimore to sign up for it. I'll be there. I'll be one of the mentors, and you know, this is a great opportunity to do some pair programming, meet other people from the programming community, and learn some JavaScript too. So I highly recommend this. So that's all. Do you want to do a Q&A or?
Do you want the Q&A recorded?
No, that's fine.
Okay.